Hey everybody, this is Aaron Ford. Thanks for joining us tonight on Everything Matters. And we have a great show tonight. We're excited to have some discussion about addiction. We've been in a series called Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll, American Idols. This is our second in that series. If it's your first time with us tonight, I like to take every night that we start off and just give you an understanding of why we call this show Everything Matters. So I grew up in a very spiritual household, and my dad was a pastor, mom and dad were pastors, and everything in life was about the spiritual. It was always about that. And it was, you can pray it out, you can read the Bible more, and I think those things are great. But as I got older and did life, realized that there was more to life than just the spiritual. There was also the emotional side of life and the practical side of life. And I think all humans are made up of these three things, of emotional needs, practical needs, and spiritual needs. And they're interwoven, and God works through all these different areas. And so that's the reason for Everything Matters. I see God in the spiritual, obviously, but also in the emotional things we go through, and practically the needs that we have too. God weaves in and out of these different sections and things of our life. So that's the reason for Everything Matters. So thanks for joining us tonight. Subscribe, like, bring friends to this. We really have a discussion here, so thanks for being a part of this tonight. So I have two friends here with me tonight, my friend Jessica Mitchell, my friend Jim Piper, and we're just going to hop into it tonight and start talking about addiction. And Jessica, would you just give us a little bit of your story and background, where you've come from, so we can, as we have a discussion, I know it's a funny thing, then I'll have Jim share a little bit too, but just give us a little bit of your story from the last 10 years. You've been a part of Riverbend, but some people who are new to hear a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, so I have kind of a crazy story. I'd made a really, really poor decision. Probably 10 years ago now, 10, 11 years ago. I've been sober for 7 years now. But I'd probably over my life drank too much, kind of dabbled here, dabbled there, but then decided to try meth. And, within a 6-month time period, had myself completely addicted to meth and was doing it every single day. Yeah, every single day for 3.5 years. And the only reason that I stopped was that I was arrested by the feds. So it was the worst and greatest day of my life, kind of all wrapped up in one. I didn't know it was going to be a great day. It was horrible at the time, but ended up getting arrested, and they don't put people like me in jail, so I was just gonna keep doing it, and kept doing it, and ended up in federal prison awaiting trial. Actually, I guess a county jail awaiting trial, and then ended up getting 15 months. So they do arrest people like me.
You found out they do, actually, yeah.
People, and those people will break the law. But again, that's part of the addiction and the disease and everything, is thinking you're above stuff, and just your brain just doesn't work right. But so I spent the next 15 months in jail and getting sober, and learning a lot of hard lessons along the way, but some very valuable ones. I also found God in jail. And so that's kind of where it became one of the greatest things.
Tell us a little bit about that, because I think your story about this is really cool, how you kind of connected to Riverbend in jail. So
originally, I first started when I was in jail, I was just literally trying to acclimate. And every week they'd come in and say, I need a church list, ladies. And I was like, I don't go to church. So, and I just kind of blew it off every week. And then one week I was playing cards with this woman, and they came in and did it, and she was like, "Oh, I'm going," and I was like, "Oh, great, she's leaving now, and I can't play cards," and all that's kind of running through my mind. And she looks at me and she goes, "You coming?" And I was kind of like, I thought, I don't go to church, where's church? It's got to be anywhere other than this room that I've been sitting. I was like, sure. So I kind of went to church, and that was the first time that I had, as an adult, chosen to go to church. And kind of had some profound things happen that night that could only be God really I'm trying to get your attention. And then so I kind of started delving into that, my Bible and books that I had my dad send me. And then I would get up on Sundays as best I could, because he didn't have an alarm clock. I didn't have somebody come wake me up. I just had to shoot for it, to watch Joel Osteen. And sometimes I would just wake up too early, and I would catch this guy from Dave Haney.
Not Have Daney, but Dave Haney, right?
Dave Haney. I would catch
There's a
this
new
guy.
real famous guy named Have Daney. So
Yeah, Dave Haney, and I was just like, man, I love this guy. You know, everything he says it just really resonates with me all week. And so I found myself trying to get up to catch him because that was even harder. And I'd be really frustrated when I couldn't. And then I didn't realize that it was local, television stuff. So I had no clue it was here in Austin. I just really liked this guy. And then I found out it was in Austin, and it just was amazing and wonderful. And I knew that when I got out, this was going to be my church.
And it has been, hasn't it?
And it has been.
This is your church experience, which is super awesome. And so you said 7 years you've been sober.
May 17th.
Yeah, that's awesome. We're going to get a little bit more of your story as we kind of hop through this too. Jim, would you share a little bit of your story too, kind of where you've come from? Because you have an equally very interesting. You were in jail from the feds, but you're on the lawyer side of it. You can send some people there, right?
I come from a little different way. I'd been an atheist for the first 57 years of my life, basically, and the time this story really begins, I'm 57 years old. I'm an atheist. I look like I'm really successful and got it together. I've got a successful law practice, the nice house, all of that. But I have a loved one who is very addicted. I'm a lawyer. 18 to 24% of us are alcoholics.
Yeah.
That's what the statistics say. And I was certainly doing my best to keep those numbers up, particularly at this stage, because that's how I was dealing with my problems, was I was drinking more. And then finally, this loved one, it became so obvious they were going to die from their disease that I quit, because I just knew supportively if I didn't quit, that I'd be contributing to their death, because it just, as long as I'm drinking, it's just another excuse, for them to drink. And so I quit drinking, but I'm still a miserable mess. I mean, that doesn't cure my problems, just that I quit. It cured part of my problems. I wasn't drinking as much, but my life was still unmanageable, and I didn't know how to cope with life, and all those things that existed that made me deal with alcohol in the first place were still there.
Right.
And I was in the midst of trying a week-long case that involved addiction. The other side was addicted to pain medication and other medication. And at the end of it, when I was getting ready to do my closing, on the 5th day of it, I woke up really early to prepare a closing, and I got up really early like I always did, and I went in to do it. And I didn't have any additional thoughts. Usually I do kind of fine-tuning at that stage, but I didn't do that morning. And I remember being in the bathroom in the mirror, because you literally, just like when you're a kid, when you're prepping your closing, you literally do it to a mirror. And I just became aware, and remember, I'm an atheist, I just became aware of this overwhelming presence, and I had absolutely no doubt then or now that it was God. And it was, and the one message from that was for me to go to AA. That was meant, and that had been part of my closing about what she needed to do. Because I'm good at pointing out your problems.
Are we all, though, right?
And so I didn't go right away, because, of course, that's not what we do. So I got another message sent to me about a week later, and then I started to go. And that took me on a spiritual path, which led to prayer and meditation at first, and working both AA and Al-Anon, 12 steps in both. And then ultimately, after about another 6 years of doing that, led me to Christianity and then to Riverbend.
That is amazing. I've heard you tell me that story I don't know how many times, and it's still, I love it. Both of your stories. They're very inspiring. And, obviously we're talking about addiction tonight, and, I have said offhanded a few times, and I mean it. And I wonder what you guys think about this, both of you. I feel like the excess in America, for whatever reason, we seem to be the most addicted society on the planet Earth. And I say that because I've traveled around planet Earth a little bit. And I could be wrong about that, but there's a feeling to me that we are heavily addicted, and it's not just to drugs and alcohol. It's lots of other things. I think sometimes it comes out that way, but does that resonate with you guys? Do you feel there's maybe get a lot of weight to the problem? I mean, you guys see those things. Tell me, does that resonate with you, Jessica?
I'm thinking about what you're saying, and my first two thoughts on it are probably, I don't disagree with it. I don't know that it's true or false, but if it is true, then the excess in terms of we have everything at our fingertips here.
Right.
Other countries where you're, maybe struggling for things a little bit more, and just life is a little bit more of a struggle, sort of a situation. But then we're also a country, I think, that is extremely bored because we're looking for fulfillment in the wrong areas. One of the first things that I talk to somebody about that is newly sober is, how are you with being bored? And they look at me and they're like, nobody's ever asked me that before. And I'm like, well, life is boring. It's not exciting all the time. When you're drunk or you're high or, you're feeding whatever addiction it is, that's exciting. And so if you don't have that and life is boring, what are you going to do?
Right.
But I think that we just, life is kind of easy in America for the most part. And I'm not saying everybody's life is easy. That's not what I'm saying. But you're not struggling to survive.
Yeah, well, in comparison to some other places,
exactly.
for sure.
And so I think that in that replacement thing, you start getting bored. And that boredom just can lead to all kinds of, not just, drugs or alcohol, but we were kind of briefly talking a little bit about just all sorts of different addictions, and people have healthy addictions, so to speak, in terms of working out too much, but it's all to replace something. Exactly,
unacceptable addictions, basically.
But it's all to fill something that's just not there.
Yeah. What do you think, Jim? Is that?
I'd never thought of it that way. I do think there are cultural traits to addiction, which I'd never thought about until you started saying it. And I started running through countries. And the only one I'll challenge you on is, I think Russians outdrink us.
They could.
Their statistics on dying at 30 from overdrinking, we lose supposedly 6 people a day to actual alcohol poisoning. Now, that's not way more than that die from the disease, but I'm talking about drink themselves to death that day, 6. And I think in Russia it's much higher. But I think we're if we're not number one, we're trying.
We're in top. We're trying. Well, I think it's a really interesting thing for me, and part of my experience when I was. This is probably when I was 18, maybe 19. Probably pretty heavily drinking, smoking a lot of pot, those types of things. And but I came from the Christian world where I was rebelling from all this and doing my thing. For me, I realize now is numbing a lot of my own pain, a lot of my own struggle. I think there is a boredom element to it, but there was just a lot of emotional pain that I was going through that I realize now that I was just numbing the heck out of it. And at that time in my life, it was really interesting for me. I had friends who loved me dearly, who grew up in the church, grew up Christian too. They would bring this scripture to me from 1 Corinthians 3:16. It basically talks about your body as a temple, and don't destroy the temple that God builds, basically, is what the scripture says. And I always thought it was really interesting and very hypocritical, because I would look at some of the people who would say that to me, and I go, yeah, but you, even the pastor at the place, you may be 50 to 100 pounds overweight, and you're talking to me about smoking cigarettes or smoking pot or drinking whatever else, and I'm like, wait a second, this doesn't make any sense at all. There was a little bit, for me, I was evaluating all these things as a young, struggling Christian young man, I guess, trying to figure that kinds of things out. And I think it's where that journey for me started a little bit of, okay, we make alcohol and drugs, obviously, these very destructive things that can be very destructive things in our life. That, in fact, when you say addiction, most people think of drugs and alcohol.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
They don't typically go eating or gaming or workaholic or whatever. They don't.
Social media.
Yeah, I mean, we don't typically, our normal response is right to those types of things. So I think for me, this issue carries a little bit of a struggle because of the hypocrisy I think I've seen, especially with the Christian church around it for a long time. Like, these addictions are okay, but these addictions are not. I don't know if you were atheist and grew up in the church at all. I don't know if you had that perception of it, or if it was, maybe that's just me, my own experience.
As an atheist, you view your body as a playground. As a teenager, but you certainly, you have this view as an atheist of Christians being this kind of joyless bunch of people
Right.
who want to beat all the fun out of life.
Right.
And of course, the real truth of it is, and it's what's so seductive about alcohol, is that most people's first experiences with alcohol, if you don't drink so much you get sick, or same can be true of pot or whatever, is it takes the stress out of social situations that you feel awkward in when you're young. If you're having trouble with the person you're trying to get romantically interested in, it makes both of you more relaxed and talkative. In moderation, it can make you feel better, and the problem is all those positive experiences that make people come back second and third time, they begin to disappear the more you use it, until
Right.
all that positive part's gone,
Yeah,
and
it's
all
just the
that's
bad
left
stuff.
is just a need to do it.
Yeah. Are certain people wired towards addiction and others not? Yeah? You
Yeah.
feel that?
They've actually done studies. Doctors will tell you there are parts of the brain that they can predict in lab rats to some extent which ones will hit the little alcohol button to
Right.
death.
Right.
And we know that whether it's nature or nurture, we know that if one alcoholic or addict in a family increases the likelihood that the children will be alcoholics and addicts. Two makes it hugely more. Is that nature or nurture?
Yeah, it's hard. It's blurry for me
But it's
sometimes.
both.
Yeah.
Is I think.
Statistics would say so, yeah, that there's I think a 60% likelihood if there's a family history, and then it is environment and biology, genetics that are going to decide that, and it's around 40 to 60%, the two that kind of go together. I mean, just like all other behaviors, if you have a household that's doing any behavior, even if you're modeling great cooking in the kitchen every single day, or the dad's doing something that the kids see every day, whatever that is, that behavior,
It's positive
And-
or negative.
it's
Yeah.
going to
Yeah.
be ingrained.
Yeah.
So why would alcohol be any different? Or
Right.
drugs, or watching too much
Lakers.
Lakers.
I've told my
We're not
kids
talking
too.
about his real addiction.
I need a group. My wife would tell you right now, I need a group for the basketball that I watch because I have a problem.
I've told my kids though, like, because of the genetic factor of it, I was like, you've got it in you.
Yeah.
In some way, shape, or form. And they've also shown that the later you start drinking or doing drugs or things like that, experimenting, the later you do that in life, the better your chances are of being able to do it normally, if you kind of have that. So the younger you start, the worse your chances. And I was like, so I've told my kids, I was like, if you want to have a shot at doing this in a responsible way, I was like, just, you gotta
I
keep it at bay a little bit.
I asked everybody online, I asked them, are we all addicted to something? What's your response to that? Everybody on the planet, is everyone addicted to something?
Yeah. I think I'm definitely have the DNA trait or the whatever it is towards the addiction. I mean, everything I do is at 100%. I can't handle not. I mean, I was telling Kevin earlier, like, I'm literally using this app and program to try to rewire my brain about how I'm dealing with food because I love chocolate so much and cake. And that sounds funny, but I don't. It's like I can't have this much of the cake. I got that much of the cake. It's there's not one piece of cake for me. Just like there's not one drink for an alcoholic. It's the same thing that's in me, and I feel like I'm wired towards that kinds of stuff. Whether it's my work, I work that way. So I feel this, but that comes through my lenses. Maybe other people don't see that way, but you guys maybe do too. I mean, you kind of said your story is coming in a little bit dealing with boredom and that kinds of stuff. I don't know that plays
But
into
there's
some of those things.
that's more for like somebody who's trying to stay sober.
Stay sober, yeah.
Because what's going to trigger them, you know?
Right.
And boredom, I have found, has been a huge one
Yeah.
for just people. They're bored. They
Right.
didn't have a real good reason. They were just bored. So that's that. But I think like you get into the science of it too, and it's like you have the genetic DNA. But there's, like you were saying, when you first do it, it feels good.
Right.
You don't start doing something because it didn't feel good. You didn't eat chocolate because it felt bad. You didn't start, you know, no, I don't think anybody drinks alcohol because it tastes great in the beginning, but you feel good. And so you
Right.
keep doing it. You program yourself to like it because it makes you feel good.
Yeah.
And there's something, I mean, it kind of makes sense. I mean, addiction kind of makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
if it feels good, you keep doing it. But then it becomes a problem.
Well,
And that's...
and a lot of people can do it. A lot of people
Exactly.
at that level
That's
successfully.
okay. Like where you said it, you feel, you know,
Yeah.
that you feel good and it works for you.
They have a glass or two of wine and you know, and then they stop.
So weird.
And an alcoholic plans to have a glass or two of wine, and then after they have 2 glasses, they make another plan.
Yeah.
Right.
Because it's a better plan.
Yeah.
We had a comment from Jennifer. Hey Jen, how you doing? Good to see you. And Kelly's on here too. And of course Sherry, good to see all you guys. Jennifer just mentioned that I asked the question, if we're all addicted to something. She said yes, we're all addicted to something. We need a feeling of something that's determined, we need a feeling of something that's determined by our desires and needs at the moment. Emotions come from feelings that we are missing deep inside. So was that part of your experience, something that was missing deep inside? And was there an external solution to an internal problem that was worked out with your addiction?
I don't think people turn to addiction because everything else in their life is just working great and they deal great with life in general. That's not why I did it.
Yeah.
I did it to deal with stress and trying to be somebody, have you think I was somebody special, and you know, we can make a bunch of excuses, and I didn't have the God that I have now, and you know, in AA you'll hear often that you know you have a hole in your soul that you either fill with alcohol or God, and I couldn't cope with life. Is the real truth. I thought I could. If you'd have looked at me, you'd have thought I was,
too.
but I wasn't. I was miserable.
For
It
a
was
long
mess.
time?
Well, you know, for a long time. How long is the frog in the pot
Right,
of water?
But that's what I mean.
Yes, for a long. I look back. You know, I was probably an alcoholic just by personality before I took my first drink.
Yeah.
I mean, I used it for all sorts of reasons from the very start.
Yeah.
That are not what sane or rational people do.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, you know, I was saying with you guys earlier, like as I've gotten older, gone through a lot of counseling, like wrestled this out in my own life a lot. For me, the more I've told to a ton of people as I've tried to help them through these things and help them understand it, help them get a handle on it, and even, you know, conquer and thrive is, for me, the more that I delved into my own hurt and pain in my life, the dysfunction, the stuff that I wanted to numb, the more I faced that and went after that, the more healing I experienced, the more freedom I was experiencing. And I think often when we look at addiction and whatever we look at for, we look at the symptom, we look at the alcohol or the meth or the porn addiction or whatever the addiction is, we look at the symptom, we call that addiction. But for me, I think it's been a deeper experience of dealing with those hurt and pain. It's all coming up. Like, I always tell, no one's ever said, like, woken up in the morning, what do you want to do with the rest of your life? I want to be an addict. That sounds like I can be a fireman, I can be president, I can be a nurse, an addict. I'll choose that one. That's a good one. No one does that, right? You find yourself there and wrestling through those kinds of things. So, but I don't know if that's the same for you guys. That's been a lot of my own personal journey and path. I know that's for other people online too, wrestling through those things. But dealing with my own hurt and pain has brought more healing than anything. That's super hard and scary. So
Is there pain and also the desire to escape reality? And then you might say those are the same, but they might occupy the same space in most people's rational thoughts.
I was
So-
going to kind of say, like,
Go ahead.
I mean, people often ask me, like, why I started using it. And I never really have. I've really, really thought about this a lot. Because I was like, I didn't have anything that I was trying to escape from or necessarily fill at that time. You know, like, I now see, you know, God was this huge hole. You know, you fill your soul with one or the other. And that's what I was needing, for sure. But, you know, when you talked about, you know, it makes things easier in terms of social interactions and things like that. I've learned about myself that I'm definitely a people pleaser kind of person, and so that gets trying. To me, I think it was more of an escape, is kind of what you were touching on. That drinking made things easier in terms of, and I'm definitely an alcoholic, but it made it easier to be in those social situations and to, in my mind, probably not in anybody's perceived mind, be the person that I really more wanted to be. And like now I've even realized, like, I think I want to be like the socialite. I want to go do these things, but that's not who I am. You put me in those situations and all I want to do is go home.
Right.
I'm much more of this, like, I call myself a closet introvert because I have a job where I talk to people all the time. I can talk to people, but it's somewhat exhausting.
Yeah.
And so when I'm done.
Right.
Sort of a thing. And so when I started doing meth, that was not pleasing anybody. That wasn't doing anything I was supposed to be doing. It was breaking all of the rules. It was kind of this, like, this is the worst version of me, and I'm still, like, functioning. So it was that escape sort of thing. I didn't have to be this. And it was very freeing in that way, and it was very damaging, clearly. You know,
obviously.
I mean, it's not a good path to go on. So I kind of, when I landed in jail, had to kind of do a lot of that inventory sort of stuff of, you know, and learn a lot about myself. And I did one of those, like, with I think a psychologist, psychiatrist, whoever it was, and I had to do, I mean, it was like 400 questions. It was crazy, you know, it was long, and it was like, you know, it gets you all frustrated doing it. And at the end of this, I get those results that I'm angry, and I'm like, I'm not angry, but that pisses me off. You're not telling me that I'm angry. So, and I was like, I'm just not an angry person. And I started, and it took me probably a year to really unpack all that in terms of, like, I'm not an angry person. I'm not going to walk up to you and punch you in the face, but the drivers drive me crazy. Everything frustrates me.
Pushing all that down.
Oh,
probably,
yes. And I was like, I am totally an angry person, you know, and I just, and I don't like that. I have a quick fuse, like, with my kids and stuff like that, but I've accepted it. There's a difference between, you don't have to like everything
being
about
aware
yourself.
of it and accepting it.
And I have lots of things that I need to work on. I am nowhere near being complete,
So
but
here's a question, and I think this relates to it too. So when I hear you say some of those things, both of you share some of these stories, and I have these different experiences too. Do you feel like people in America and our society really understand addiction, or do you feel like it's still kind of an unknown place? Unless you cross that line, you have to end up in AA, NA, with these types of things. Is that the only way for the people to really start to understand it? And is there like a gap between there? Because I have these conversations with you, and I think they're really, really deep. And I would love to see what your perception is on that.
My perception is you can sort of understand it without being one, but I think, you know, you run into people, you know, why doesn't he or she just stop? And they don't recognize it as a disease, and that, you know, we get into these silly arguments over a word sometimes, but it's phenomenally difficult for most everyone to stop. Some people are blessed. I was blessed with a really easy road to sobriety. Part of that is, to be honest, they refer to them as bottoms, and my bottom was fairly high because I quit drinking for somebody else. If I had to wait to quit drinking for myself after problems with the law and other stuff, it probably would have been much harder. But it's a hard thing to do, and it's scary when you're an alcoholic or an addict to think about having to deal. This is so ironic. It's so scary to think about having to deal with life without it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I mean, you can sit there and think, well, yeah, this will probably take a few years off the end of my life, so what?
Yeah.
Well, and
Especially if you're miserable your whole life because you don't have it. Who cares?
Right.
well, and the state that led you into it, unless you replace it with something, and that's what the 12 steps do, or religion does. I drank because of stress and fear. Fear was a huge component that I didn't realize all the things I was fearful about in my life until I got into AA and started to hear people talk about it.
Yeah.
My mind, which is a blessing in what I do and a curse in life in general, my mind in its natural state is just this rabid squirrel that spins perpetually. And so I never had peace or serenity. For 57 years, I experienced that the first time in a 12-step meeting, in an Al-Anon meeting. I thought, what is this feeling? And I realized it was serenity. And so I drank to make that squirrel pass out.
That is amazing.
Well, I mean, it did get
the way
rid of
you
the
tell that
stress.
story is absolutely amazing.
I want to pull up some stats because I think we're being gracious a little bit. You started this conversation with asking sort of if we thought America was worse than other places or whatever else. And I'm going to have John pull up a couple of things. The first one is the quick facts on drug addiction, if you can find that
Yeah,
one.
and that's just my gut feeling. I don't have stats. You probably have more stats than I do.
Yeah, I want to throw these out too because we're being gracious saying like what's only a few of us. So 19,
Oh, no.
19 this is drug addiction, and this, we know there's a whole bunch of people that drink, but this is drug addiction. 19.7 million American adults battle substance abuse. This is from 2017. 74% of adults suffering from substance abuse with alcohol abuse. 38% of adults battled illegal drug use. The cost to American businesses is $740 billion annually. You've got another one about opioid addiction, John. This is John Jolette, by the way. John is amazing, incredible man, helping us through things. So, pain relievers, opioids, things like that. This is 2017 again. 1.7 million people age 12 and older had a pain reliever disorder. I think that's gone up quite a bit in the last 3 years. I just did some quick stuff. I wanted to get accurate stuff and not just people thought was going on. And I thought it was interesting. Women may develop a more rapid addiction to painkillers than men because of some chronic pain issues and things like that. So it is an epidemic. It is not just a select few. And then we have one more I want you to pull up, John, because we talked about this too. Things besides just drugs and booze. Fast food.
Fast food, yeah.
And while he's pulling it up, there's a 60% increase for women in alcoholism, according to a couple recent studies over the last 10 years. There's a 60%. They're 60% more likely to get addicted. They're
Fascinating.
And it may be lifestyle. I mean, if
I wonder if that goes to the pleasing side or the pressure.
If your children know what mommy juice is, that may be a problem.
Netflix and mommy juice.
You've seen it all as a divorce lawyer, haven't you? Yeah, I'm sure that's probably tough.
Let me bring up some more of these real quick. Love and sex. Obviously, pornography. We talked about that last week.
Yeah.
Sexual promiscuity. Plastic surgery is something that's actually an addiction that's rising. Who would have thought? I think it comes from never looking good enough, is what one source had indicated. Shopping, which means you never have enough. There's a scarcity model that happens with addictions. Internet gaming. A lot of people I know they're playing poker online. Exercise. We mentioned that before. You can go to the gym a little too much. And compulsive lying, because reality isn't good enough, is one of the other things. So I think there's a lot of different ways to look at this rather than just drugs
And alcohol,
or booze.
Yeah.
For sure.
There's so many other things that we find ourselves addicted
Well,
to.
that's what I'm saying. There's an underlying part of this. I think we do it a disservice sometimes when we just lock it into the symptom and not understand the heart of what goes on with addiction. And that's why I think we have a lot of people running around just as addicted. It just happens to be buying shoes instead of heroin, or playing softball 5 nights a week, 6 nights a week, than drinking, or I don't know. I mean, that's what I'm getting at. I think sometimes my feeling is, and what I'm sharing tonight, I think is a lot of my own feelings and just of observations. It seems like we accept those things. We accept someone working 90 hours a week as an addiction because, oh, look, they're being productive, as opposed to someone, drinking 12 beers a day. We've obviously that has a different effect in your life than working 80, 90 hours a week, but I think the root of it is the
I was
same.
gonna say the root, that the root is exactly the right word to use too, because it's whatever is going on underneath. It's that same sort of thing, but how it's manifesting it.
Yeah.
Drugs and alcohol are not acceptable because of not only the self-damage it does, but then the damage it does to
Right,
everything
to
around
society,
it too.
yeah.
If you work too much, you still have that root underlying thing going on, but it's not harming. You're not killing somebody by overworking. But you're
But
you're
you
gonna
don't have serenity.
I don't know.
No, you don't have
Well,
serenity.
it could be, yeah.
Like you're not gonna
But
like
the point
Go,
is,
Jim.
drinking and driving or things
you
like that.
talked about serenity, though. When
That's
he
right.
talked
Oh,
about
for
serenity,
sure.
you're still not getting the serenity that you just talked about.
Well, you're destroying your family and sort of stuff,
and
too.
you're very
Yeah,
likely
for sure.
destroying your family. I do divorce law, and I'm going to tell you that those long hours, you're not there for your children. It's all a form of kind of self-medication
Yes.
Absolutely.
of a problem.
I've had struggled with workaholic. I mean, you can ask my wife. We've had serious difficult parts of our marriage because of, and it's for the church, right? It's for God, for me as a pastor, right? But it's horrible. I mean, it could absolutely destroy my family, and it almost did for me too. So I relate to that.
And my father was a workaholic. I swore I'd never be a workaholic. I was a workaholic.
Yeah.
It
goes back to what he's saying.
Behaviors
about
in the
behaviors in the
household.
house, for sure. It's
I think
crazy.
my wife and daughter are watching, so they know exactly what the behaviors are that they see in the household from me.
So if it's
By the way, real quick, other
Yeah.
people watching, just want to let you know, Brian Rawson is watching, and he said you're one of the good guys, but don't tell you that. All right, Brian,
stuff.
we got that.
So I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. I mean, because what ends up happening, because we are, what I would still say, if we're not number one, we're top 5 in addicted societies in the world. I like your idea about the Russians making a play for that. I think that I'll have to do some research about that. But I also think we end up being, those of us who have gone through it, more aware. And it's kind of forced us to say, okay, what are we going to do about this? And I do think that there ends up being some answers, some serenity. Like one of the things I love about AA and NA, they promise an experience with God. Like they promise that. Like you're going to have a life. Like that's the promise when you walk in. One of my friends and I were talking about that recently. What an amazing promise. I wish, I would love for the church to be saying that. I would think we should, but what a great promise to have this experience with God. Do you think we're also equipped then to help people walk out of these addictions? Not only the drugs and alcohol one, but even the other stuff, the workaholic, which you could document. You could write a book on marriages falling apart because of work, right?
I absolutely believe that if you look at both AA and Al-Anon and NA, although there's really no difference particularly between NA and AA, you can go to either and get the same thing. In fact, AA meetings probably have as many people whose drug of choice is a narcotic as alcohol in them. But I believe that those two programs probably far outdistance Billy Graham in terms of converting people to Christianity. Because, and I was in those programs for a long time before I came all the way to Christianity. I was certainly believing in the same God I do now.
Right.
But it was just, it was a path, and I knew I was on a journey.
Yeah.
And I knew at some level, alcohol's only mentioned in the first and the 12th step of AA. It's mentioned in the first step only to mention that you're powerless over it. And in the 12th step, after you've gotten some level of sanity, you're told to go out and help other alcoholics.
Right.
And all the rest of it is how to live your life.
Right.
And that's how to turn your life and your will over to God and how to manage your behavior.
It's the second step, right? Surrender your will and life over to power greater than you, right? Is that what it is? Yeah.
Comes in the third.
Yeah, third. Oh, yeah. How important is that in the process, though, of surrendering your life?
For me, it was everything, and it was before I even knew it in the AA. I went to church first in
Right.
jail, and then I started going to AA too because I thought that would look good. But I wasn't an alcoholic or an addict. But it was going to look good for the judge.
You were in federal prison for meth, but you weren't an addict, right?
No.
And I'm not angry. I
Actually, I
swear.
decided at
But I'm
one
pissed
point
off that I'm angry.
when I was going to the AA things, at one point I went because it was looking good, but I decided that I wasn't going to do drugs anymore because that's why I was sitting in jail.
Right.
But I had every intention of drinking still when I got out. But sitting in those AA meetings and stuff, I started going, I think I'm an alcoholic too. But yeah, no, it was, for sure.
Surrender is a big word.
Yep.
It is.
It's a big word in
It's
the
huge.
program.
So what goes on if we have a group in society that doesn't think that they have a problem with whatever problem they're doing, and I'm not limiting it to drugs and alcohol, they're addicted to whatever they're addicted, they don't see it as an addiction. It seems like a long path for them to be aware of that and then start to make some changes. I'm wondering what you guys think about that, what should we do in society to make those things better? Because to me, it seems like a long, scary path to get there, and a lot of people aren't aware of it. And that may just be my perception of it. I don't know how you feel about that.
The problem is with most of these problems, you're only going to quit when your life becomes so miserable it
Right.
makes you. People, they'll tell people in AA, if you're not done drinking, go out and keep drinking and come back when you're ready to quit.
That's a
I was sitting
crazy
in jail
statement,
and I wasn't
right?
going to quit.
I've heard
yeah.
that so many times,
You have to be there.
and I know it's true, but it's still crazy to hear that.
Well, but if you're not ready, you're just conning me, and you can't deal with life in a dishonest way. You have to be honest with yourself, and you have to be honest about your problems, and at some level, change comes from pressure. Victory comes from battles.
Tell me what you mean by change comes from pressure. Can you dig in that a little more for me? I think that would be good for all of us.
We could do some biblical stories about
sure,
it, but
for sure,
but we don't change and leave these things which we've become so dependent upon unless we have to,
Right.
unless we're in prison, unless we're trying to save somebody's life. Who, oddly enough, I wouldn't have quit drinking to save my own. Go figure that. But we don't, and that's why, again, you'll hear if you talk to addiction specialists, you'll hear generally the two hardest people to get clean and sober are the very, very poor who are homeless and under bridges, because it's hard to get them resources to them. It's hard to get the support. And then the very, very rich, because the very, very rich don't hit bottom because they have money to keep them from
Buffer.
losing jobs.
Right.
They have
Yeah.
money to take care of them. They have money to have, some of the most successful lawyers, who've done personal injury work, who've made millions of dollars, have to have people drive them everywhere because they're, at this stage of their career, they're drunk. Or at the end of their careers, and they can't even drive at 10 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah.
And so, it's just, we're a resistant group. How easy is it to surrender? Oh, I don't. I surrender some days, and most days I take it back. I do best when I surrender, but
Yeah.
And isn't it part of the program? One of the hardest part is they'll tell you, work your own program. You can't work it for somebody else. Now, even though step 12 is to bring it to other people, there's this caveat that says, because part of the sickness of addiction is wanting to control not only your own life, but other people's as well. So if you're gonna go out and say, you need to be in AA, you need to be in AA, that's not how it works either. It's attraction rather than, roping them in.
No, it is attraction. It's just like Riverbend. We try to get people to come in out of a sense of attraction, and you go to those meetings because you got something positive out of them, because they helped you in your life, and you kept going back to get more of that. If all you got is a bunch of misery, and if life, like Jessica and I lead it, is just the two of us, white knuckles on this table trying desperately, do you want to do drugs? I want to drink. I'd swallow a bullet before I'd live my life like that. In fact, the beauty of this life is that it's so much better than you ever could have dreamed it to be.
That's beautiful.
But it's hard to get to this point.
And
when
nobody believe it when they're back in that other point.
Well, and when I was drinking all the time, I couldn't imagine, like you had said at one point, life without drinking. Like, how do you go out on the lake in a boat without alcohol? How do you go out to dinner and not drink? How do you go to a party and
fun?
Like how do you do anything? And isn't it just miserable? Like, you can't even see that when you're there, that it can be all these good things. You can't even see it.
Is it odd or hard for you to see people who are able to do that as recovering addicts? Because when you see people who are able to do that in moderation, is that oh, good for them? Or is it like man, I wish I could do that? Or is there any of that? Is there a struggle towards that thing, or bitterness towards people when you see that they can't handle it?
No, the disease mind of mine sometimes is like, I think I could probably drink. Like, I think I'm there. I think I could, just have a drink or two. And then I'm like, if I could just have a drink or two,
I love you.
Why would I need?
You can't.
No, I know. But I'm like, why do I need to have a drink or two?
Yeah.
Like
Right.
in the reality of it, and where the healthy side of my mind is, no, you can't. And I know that I can't. But what would be the point?
Right.
Like, especially with that alcoholic mind, like, I don't see the point of one or two drinks. So why would I ever try to have one or two drinks?
See, this is
Because you drink
what's
to get
weird.
drunk when you're an alcoholic.
No one thinks about this about our work hours, though. Like what you just shared about alcohol, to transfer that to, like when we talk about workaholics, when you just very clearly talked to as a divorce lawyer, that's a huge thing in a lot of people's marriages. So we see this as a problem. Like the jump from going from that, how you've learned to deal with this and really been successful in it, that doesn't jump over to, for some reason in our minds, it doesn't jump over to workaholicism, or however we would call it, about, okay, I can't work more and more and more. I can't do more of this stuff. Otherwise, this and this and this. The tape doesn't play out when we talk about those things.
It's funny, though, because
or
I can
sports
hear
addictions or whatever else. It's really interesting.
The underlying side of it, but I can't understand the working. Like when you said, can other people understand addiction and things like that? Like I can understand why somebody would work too much and put things, their family lives at risk, because there's something else going on.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't fathom working too. Like, I don't want to overwork. I don't want to go to the gym all the time. I don't understand
Right.
There's endorphin rushes from going to the gym all the time.
Yeah,
Totally.
I've tried that, and I can't find that endorphin rush at all.
Like, why can't I be wired for that addiction?
Exactly. But that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't understand that, but I can understand the root of it. Like, I can
Right.
understand where it's coming from, but I don't understand. So I don't know that you can understand somebody else's
For sure.
addiction.
Totally.
But
And that's my point, is I don't know if you can. I mean, I think that's what's really unique about this idea of addiction, is how it plays out in different people's lives. It can really understand everybody's. That's why I keep getting back to the root of it. And I think I really desire for humans in general to be able to have that serenity that we talk about. And I don't see a lot of that going on in society. In fact, as a pastor, I often see people coming after whatever challenge it is, whether it's a marriage or addiction or a death in the family or something has brought them to the church, like, I need some help with life, with whatever those things are. But I don't often see a lot of surrender and serenity in a lot of human situations. I mean, whether it's drugs or not. And I guess that's the jump that I've been wrestling through and trying to figure out how to make in society, is how do people experience that? And then maybe just everybody has to have their own
There's a 12-step statement. By the way, I've got a bunch of 12-step little quotes that we're going to go through in a bit. But one of them is, old behaviors are more comfortable than being serene.
Wow.
Have you heard that one before? In one of the meetings?
I have. And it's really true. That's why we go back to old behaviors. That's why children who were beat up as children will beat their own children.
Oh, yikes.
That's why there's something that in our nature that even though where we came from was horrible or something, we return there because it's familiar and new is something, and men have a hard time realizing how fearful we really are by nature.
Right.
I'll buy that.
It was a real revelation to me when I began to deal with my own defects of personality, how much I was fearful of.
Jennifer says that she gets a chance to speak about her own survival when she faces obstacles and shares those with other people. I think that's a lot of what the program does. And Brian Rawson is reminding us that in most circles, workaholics view it as a badge of honor.
Brian, that is
Yeah.
a great statement.
It's true.
And it is, and I think that's what's in Brian's statement there is awesome, because what ends up happening is some of the things I think in our own insecurity or pain or fear and all these things, we start to find a value in these other things. I mean, I remember as young when I was probably 13 when I started smoking pot, and I think I drank for the first time when I was like 12. But there was a badge of honor to that. Just like what Brian's saying with the work, it was kind of like, hey, like I'm in the club. That's what it was for me, and there's a good bit of rebellion in that too. But I think we do. I love that statement from Brian about whether you're the workout person or the workaholic or the musician. I mean, I would say there's been times in my life that I'm addicted to playing music. I mean, music. They're like, oh, you're really good at music, and I was like, yeah. Play it like 10 hours a day,
Well, those are like the good addiction,
Yeah.
so to speak. Like,
Yeah.
some things are
But it
looked
was
at as
still,
being.
to your point about the hole in your life, I was using so many different things to fill the hole in my life. And some of the things look good and were productive. But they themselves weren't bad, but it's how I ended up using them to fill those holes, which worked. What Brian said very clearly in this statement.
Well,
you can do that
and
at work too.
And if work isn't causing problems in your life at the level you're doing it, if your family's still happy with you and you're still spending time with your children, if you have any or if you don't, and if your working out isn't causing problems in your life, I mean, that's when things become addictions.
Right.
Is when we have to do them in spite of the fact that they're beginning to have these negative consequences. It really doesn't matter how much you drink or do drugs. Is it having negative consequences in your
Right.
life? You don't have to wait for your first or second DWI to decide that that hey, alcohol isn't making my life better. It's causing consequences.
For sure.
And statistically, the two main sources, one of them says 8% of us are alcoholics, and the other says 12%, and that's just alcoholics.
Yeah. So it could be other things, yeah.
And I mean, that's a lot. And so, and that cuts across all spectrums. Some people may be a little higher, but it cuts across all spectrums. So when you look around, I hate to say it, but when you look around Riverbend Church and there, 800 people sitting there, probably 80 of them are alcoholics.
Yeah.
And some of them are in recovery,
Right.
but that's the minority.
But see, when I hear that, and I agree with that statement, this is just being a pastor too, looking at the congregation, seeing that. I also know the stats that I think it's 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 women are abused, physically, mentally, emotionally. You can walk around our church too and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and you wonder about that kind of pain that leads to these kind of numbing things. Like I see the cycle of how this pain and the numbing goes together, and I could put kids in these things and just all the pain we go through as humans. I understand. Like I look at what we go through as humans, especially in our society, and I go, yeah, I get it. I get why we're addicted.
And your 1 out of 4 is undoubtedly underreported because it's one
Absolutely.
of those statistics
And
that
you're-
people aren't going to admit to, just like alcoholism.
You're
It's
a
gonna
lawyer,
be
you know, I mean,
underreported
that's-
because you don't want to say you
So
are.
think about that amount of pain that's going on,
Yeah.
and we're looking for ways, and that's just one issue. I mean, that's just one of all
Oh,
sorts of stuff.
the people who have, 20, 30 affairs during their marriage.
Right.
And again, that comes from your experience of being a divorce lawyer.
Yeah.
That's what's really interesting having you part of this conversation with all of us, because I think you have an interesting perspective with some
I
of
also
this
wanted to mention that when we're talking about this, I think I got this from 12 Steps, but if I didn't, I got it from one of my mentors. He would say the purpose of our spiritual life is to learn how to transform our pain, not transmit it. And is that a 12-step thing? Have you heard that one?
I haven't heard
Say
that
that
one.
one more time.
We need to learn how to transform our pain, not transmit it.
Yeah.
And part of the different things, your abuse, different addiction, we're transmitting our pain. We're projecting it as opposed to learning how to transform it. And
Well, and that's why these are family diseases, because we do, an alcoholic or an addict in a family unit they will make everybody go crazy.
Yeah.
It's a family disease. They will make everybody ill and codependent and in the time, I mean, the experts say having an alcoholic or an addict who's practicing is like having a mobile where you spin one piece out of control and everybody else reacts to it.
Oh, I gotcha, sure.
So, man, this is great stuff. But so, what do we do? Like, we just went through a lot of different scenarios and things, and I think started to dial the problem. And like, from your guys' perspective, and I know you've both had a really interesting journey with Riverbend. Like, what do you think are things that the church particularly could do to really help? I mean, and maybe we're just doing what we need to do. But I mean, me coming at this as a pastor and trying to help our congregation move towards different things. You guys have gone through these things. What could we do that would really be meaningful to help some of these things? Or that we are doing?
I mean, I know for me personally, like I've done AA and I've done NA and stuff like that. I'm not huge into the programs, but I live a life of what AA says. And that kind of goes back to when I had said that Gerald Mann had at one point said that AA is the gospel in drag.
That is
And
a great line. We need to
but it's so
loop
true.
that. AA, say it again.
AA is the gospel in drag.
I love that line.
And but what's so true about that for me is that because of church and what I get in church, but then go live a life of service. It's like I feel like I live AA. So for me, going to the meetings hasn't been this huge connection sort of thing. It's being involved in the church, staying, in my Bible, and I even fluctuate from that from time to time, and I have better times with that than others, and I struggle there sometimes. It's not a perfect thing, spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection, for sure. So, but that, I've got to. The service piece, I think, for me has been
Serving people?
the biggest. I mean,
Yeah.
I live out at community first, and I live a life of service.
Right, you do.
And I don't necessarily want to do it every day. And some days I'm better at it than I am other days. But I know that has been a huge piece of my sobriety.
That's been part of the antidote for you,
Oh,
huh?
it's because we are very selfish. I think kind of by nature in general, but then the addict takes that selfishness to a whole new level.
Yeah.
And then if you are trying to get out of that, you have to start becoming selfless more so. And so living that life of constant service, it gets me out of me
Right.
and focused on others. I think when again, it's
Yeah.
that boredom thing. There's all these different, caveats of this that go together, but it's that just being too self-ish.
Yeah.
Focused.
Self-focused, selfish, and all that stuff. When you live a life of service, I mean, that's what Jesus tells us to
Right.
do. That's all of it is, getting away from being the Pharisee, thinking you're above everybody. It's getting, you wash other people's feet.
Isn't
Everything
there
that
balance
you
to this
do
though too?
is what?
To the service, and
Can you be addicted to that?
Yeah, because
You can, I suppose, like for sure, people like over, and there's the people pleaser side of me.
For sure.
But it doesn't naturally come to
Right,
me. It's
right.
not something that I want to go do every single day. It's something that I'm like, I need to go do this.
so I've been doing pastoring stuff, getting volunteers for a long time. Enjoy that. It's part of my calling. I think what I love to do. But I've gotten to the point now I can tell you who, without talking to them, who is an addict or they come and they want to serve, because they're like, I'm gonna do that, 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 and I'm like, hold on, what's going on with you? Like, you can tell they're in that mode, because I think it's absolutely necessary to serve other people when you're going through this. But even then, it's so crazy that even in the service part of it, we can still be addicted to whatever comes from that whole feeling. And I say that like I'm that same guy. Like I
But it's finding that
learned when I've
balance,
learned
though.
from missions from being that guy.
Well,
too,
it's that
so.
hole, like in your soul. That was just, I don't know if
Absolutely.
I've heard it said that way before, and I'm sure I have, but it really resonates. You feel the hole in your soul, with something else, or you fill it with God.
Right.
And if you're not constantly filling it with God, and for me, the best way that I plug into that is service, because it's
Yeah.
connecting with other people, and you see God working in other people, and then you see God working over here, and you see these two people together, and you start seeing it and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So that's how I kind of constantly keep the filling of pouring
For
God
sure.
in, because that hole doesn't get filled once and for all.
Right.
It starts to drain itself back out, and you have to fill it again. And I
Yeah.
think if you get to, I've got this, set with that hole, then that's where it all just
Yeah.
goes
I love
massively
that,
awry.
Jessica. I think that is great.
Yeah, the minute you think you've got it, God will challenge you with something that
Yeah.
will
So-
show you don't.
I mean, I promised you guys we'd go through these. So these are some quotes that I've heard in 12-step meetings. And I want to see if you've heard them before or if you have one that's like it. So if you have one that's like it, you can relay it back to us. Okay, so these are things I've heard in meetings. We're part of $1 million program, but it gets shoved up our one nickel at a time.
I had heard
That's a
that.
new one.
It's $1 million program that gets shoved up your
Jessica's gone.
rear end one nickel at a time.
I would have left the meeting if they told me that one, right?
That's a new one.
Never heard that one? All right. When you get your ducks in a row, you find out it's someone else's ducks.
I've heard that one.
Yeah.
That's for the codependents. That's for the people that are trying to help out other people
Yeah.
all the time. Ask God to put one hand on your shoulder and one on your mouth.
Ooh.
Yep.
Yeah, I've heard that.
This is similar to it. Suit up, show up, shut up, pay attention, and tell the truth.
Yep.
Heard that one too?
Variations of it, yeah.
If you spend a minute being angry, resentful, or fearful, you've wasted a minute.
I haven't heard that one, but it's great.
I was like, I like that one. But
I was
But you
mentioning-
weren't angry though.
I'm not angry. I'm
You're
pissed
making
off
me
at
angry.
it.
You're making me angry talking about it.
This is one we use in my own home. You don't have to be right or have the last word. And what comes out of that, would you rather be right or be well? I use that one all the time.
I like
Sometimes
those.
it's not important to be right, it's important to be well. But we can't help it.
Yeah, I'm working on that one.
I thought you guys would have heard most of those.
I think those are great. But I love, that's what I do love about this
love the
culture, is
program.
it has those one-liners of those things. So
I've heard so many one-liners, but those are
Those are
some
good.
new ones.
I sit in the meetings and take notes, and I think, as I mentioned to Jim, they're probably thinking I'm not paying attention. Oh, that's a good one.
He's over there taking
That's
notes.
a good one.
So I asked her a little bit. I would love to hear what you think. What she says she's serving. That's part of how she's doing this. So you would say, like, as a church or as a group, as many opportunities as possible for people to serve is the bit of an antidote to helping people along this journey. Just
Serve and be able to see, like, because of how I serve
Right.
and where I serve, I get to see God
right.
at
That's a
work.
part of
and
the
so
process
I
for
don't
you.
know
Yeah.
if serving's right or just being able to experience God.
What do you think?
It's interesting, in the 12-step where you go out and help other alcoholics, that's actually for you, not for them.
Right.
If you read the book, although it's obviously for everybody. I I think in terms of things that would help, I think the church, you know, and this has been a great discussion because of this, I think the church needs to get over this idea, which I think is just part of all of our nature. If you know, problems I don't have, but if you do them, I really look down on you.
Right.
You know, if I've never had an affair, but somebody else falls and has an affair, I'm really judgmental about. That's our nature. It's not just me. And if we wrap it back to a lot of these addictions that we don't approve of, and we can include the adultery one, because I used to be real judgmental about, particularly pastors and now I'm just really, you know, we're all just broken people who mess up and I need His grace every day.
Yeah.
And so I need to, and the other thing is God's told me I have a full-time job taking care of my own behavior. I really don't have time to worry about yours.
There's another one of those. That's a good line there.
But I think we could have a greater understanding that at the end of the day, if you go out and you go out and you're around, for example, a bunch of formerly homeless addicts, which I have the opportunity to be around, what you realize is that they're just you. We're all just the same.
Yeah.
We all have way more things in common than we do differences.
Yeah.
And the things we have in common are beautiful, and the things that we're different are beautiful. And I think sometimes the church builds walls because I think sometimes we prejudge certain types of people, and we're not all that sure.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, a 13-year sober alcoholic, I'm probably all right.
Yeah.
Somebody just coming in off the street a little grubby with a meth addiction, get yourself cleaned up before you come back.
Right.
I think churches can have that kind of attitude sometimes. And
There's an old saying that I'd heard often that was very meaningful to me was that, and it gets us about the church. The church likes to clean the fish before they catch them. And I think that has been the difficulty of church with these issues, right? Because we want, it's hard, isn't it?
you know, and I think Riverbend does a better job than anybody else I know.
Yeah.
Because they do, you know, we tend to take people, but I think we could have a greater understanding of, you know, it's human nature. I'm not being critical of people. I think it's all of us. What we don't know, we're a little fearful of. Is this going to change? We got a great church now. If we encourage more of this element in, are we going to really hurt ourselves? And the answer is no, we'll make ourselves richer.
Man, as you're talking about that, though, I just feel like in all of society, I think we had more of that perspective with people. I just feel like it's been a common thing of us talking about the divisiveness, just going after other humans has been just a really difficult thing for me to watch. I feel like we need a strong dose of that in the church and outside the church for us to see some things change. But that's a mind shift. That's a mind shift. That's a mental shift for us to do that, not only in the church and outside the church. Kevin, there's a scripture from Romans that you wanted that I think gets to that.
This goes along with the question as we're going to wrap up a little bit here. And the question I have for both of you is there's studies and there's a lot of anecdotal evidence that I've experienced that we can change the neural pathways in our minds to overcome these behaviors and these addictions. Do you think that's true? And the Romans passage is the one about the renewing of our minds that you've probably heard before. Do you think that's true, that we might have had these predispositions to certain activities and behaviors, and especially addictions, and we can change that? Can we change the way our minds are wired?
I mean, I think 100% you can. I don't know that changing the wiring. You can change your behaviors and different things. But it's the hardest thing you're ever going to do in your entire life. It's not easy. But I mean, I think anybody who's in recovery or has broken the cycle of abuse in their family or, has changed anything, something has changed. I don't know if it's rewired or you just learn new behaviors. Like what you're talking about in the family, you see it, and that gets repeated. I don't know if it's, I don't know.
What do you think, Jim?
I think that I don't want to say that I can actually rewire the
Right.
pathways in
Right.
my brain particularly, but I do believe that the process, if you go through it, is going to break you totally down. And in your brokenness, you will be rebuilt. The Bible promises us a new heart. I certainly needed a new heart. I took great pride in not having one before. I did.
That was
You're
your
laughing,
badge of-
but it's true.
That was your badge of honor, huh?
I have some horrible things I used to say.
Yeah.
And so I do think that we're remade when we replace what alcohol was in my life. My life will always be a struggle between alcohol, which as a Christian I literally view as the devil, on one side of me and God on the other. And I can't serve two. I can only serve one. And that's my choice in life. And if I choose alcohol, or if I went to drugs, because even though I didn't particularly do drugs except when I was way younger, I'd be addicted to those in a minute. I will instantly get separated from God over here. And that's my choice. But I do think that the beautiful part of this process is why you'll hear people say they're a grateful alcoholic or they're a grateful addict. I mean, I bet Jennifer's a grateful.
That's what I say. I'm a gratefully recovered alcoholic addict.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because you are a different person,
Yep.
a better person. And so, yeah, I do think in that way that we are forever changed
Beautiful.
until we have our next drink.
Were you going to do a song?
No, I think I'm gonna save it for.
He's going to
another-
bail on a song.
Yeah.
It's a song he loves, and I think he wants to save it for another time.
I may. I was.
I
Gonna
wanted to say one last thing, just
Sure.
real
Yeah.
quick, on what you were saying, because I was thinking about the flip side of like accepting different people in here and stuff like that, and how sometimes we can be judgmental, and I'm definitely a judgmental person, so I get that. But on the flip side of that too, I think we're also, because we are also judgmental and we understand that, we're also very scared to let people know our shortcomings
Oh, absolutely.
and where I'm struggling and where I'm falling and where I'm failing because I'm afraid you're going to judge me.
Yeah.
As opposed to just, I think we're, as a Riverbend church, I think we're very accepting of helping others. We've got Community First, we've got Travis Heights. We
Yeah.
accept those who are broken and we
Yeah.
want to help them. But to admit that we're broken and we need that help,
Yeah, that's
think-
why I'm
I
a
think we
pastor
could-
here because I'm messed up, and they still want me to be a pastor here. So everybody's got a good chance. Kevin Dewar, yeah,
Except we need, as a church, though, to move past just feeding them to getting to know them,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
community
Yeah.
first model, to having them become part of our inner circle of friends,
Yep.
to have them becoming our brothers and
relationships.
sisters.
Sort of
True
like
relationships.
the two people sitting in front of me. That's you guys.
yeah. Well, I mean, I agree with you completely. I mean, I was talking with earlier about this, and we'll kind of wrap up with this. But we did a mission trip to Mexico, and it was Riverbend guys, men from the Bridge program, and men from Community First. And this was about a year ago. And I was like, man, how's this gonna go? Because Community First and Travis Heights, different kind of vibe of how they deal with these issues. And Riverbend guys, I was like, this could be wild. It was one of the most amazing experiences I had. And I've been on a bunch of mission trips, but the relationships that were being formed there and just the realness of that, to me, that relationship is just such the antidote to some of these things. Just like you talked about being vulnerable, but that doesn't come unless you're somewhat vulnerable. I think it's really interesting, our fears that you talk about, especially with addiction and different things. There's so much fear to be honest and real about who we are. And that's where I think the groups give you a safe place to do that. But it's still scary to do that out in other places, and it's really scary sometimes to do that at church. Maybe most of the times at church.
But we deny ourselves great pleasure. I have this dog that God gave me, and I live downtown, and so I have to walk the dog. And I've lived downtown for a bunch of years, and my dog doesn't care how much money you have. My dog looks at you, and
Yeah.
if you look like somebody who might pet her, she will go up, lick your hand, lick your ankle, and get petted. And so I started meeting homeless people.
Right.
And one of the things I don't like about the virus right now is people aren't as social in general. And so,
Yeah.
but I started sitting down at picnic tables with them because of my dog.
Right.
Because otherwise, we have these natural barriers. And I would have missed out on meeting some incredible people with incredible stories who I loved. The guy who died in the Shoal Creek Bridge, that guy was named Doc. I knew Doc. In that flood under the Shoal Creek Bridge a year and a half or so ago, whenever that was. We need that real connection.
Yeah.
That crosses, that doesn't say I'm too good to be with you.
Moves
Or
past the
you're
numbers.
above me because I feel uncomfortable around you.
Right, so you end up moving past the statistics and the numbers and just putting people in categories to being real people, real humans with each other.
Well, we cheat ourselves when we don't do
I
that.
agree. But it's also part of the antidote, I think, to some of the addiction stuff is having real relationships, real healthy relationships. It's the part of the pathway for it, so.
And it gives us a chance to share God with other people too.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's where I think God shows up in a lot of those things, amazing and very powerfully, So I love that, man. You guys, your insight into this, I know I've just enjoyed this so much, and I think there's just so much more for this. If you're watching, and if you're struggling with some of these things, you can always email me at the church, and I'd love to help you, and one of our other pastors, and you don't need to feel weird about any of that. We'd love to help you. And I'm sure there's other people who love to talk with you. If you're watching tonight and like, man, I need to work on some stuff, we're here for you. That's what we're all about. So I want to just remind you, we're going to wrap it up. Tomorrow night, we'll have our hymn sing.
Yeah, we've got a really, really, really cool guest tomorrow night. One of my favorites at River Bends. I've not seen Joe for a while, but Joe Morales, who plays saxophone and sings, will be with Carlton tomorrow night.
That's awesome.
I'm super excited. If you haven't seen Joe before, he's just amazing.
Join us for that, and we'll have the family show coming out again on Thursday. Are we doing Immerse this week?
Immerse is
Got
happening this
week.
Friday night.
And Sunday morning we'll be back with 2 services at 9:15 and 11:30. And just
correct.
encourage you to stay connected, keep coming, being a part of these discussions of different things. And like I said, like this on YouTube and Facebook, and stay connected with us. And invite friends and other people. We'd love to connect with you. So thanks for being with us tonight. We'll talk to you guys soon.